just flown into his heart.
I've always had a critical approach to reading. I always argue with the authors, and I want children to grow up having a very respectful disdain for authority. When I came here to teach in the Reading and Language Arts part of the School of Education, I was asked to do a course on children's literature. And so I designed a course using controversial books, if possible, wherever possible.
During her more than 40 years as an educator, Masha Rudman sought out books with these controversial themes and ones which she thought would evoke critical thinking in her students and others. When she found these books, she held on to them, acquiring an extensive library for her and her students to use.
Finally, when I retired just a few years ago, we had over 8,000 volumes, children's books mostly.
In the fall of 2011, Masha Rudman donated her extensive collection of over 8,000 children's books to the W.E.B. Du Bois Library.
And I feel so overwhelmed and inundated with your love. It's just very hard.
Imagine having a collection in one place where I see not only myself, but the selves of my friends and my families and people I've not even met yet is amazing, and I'm grateful for it.
Whether it is curiosity, pleasure, education, or research that attract us to this collection, it is indeed one of its kind.
When an individual entrusts her life's work to the library and to the university, it is a demonstration of confidence in the ability of the institution to organize, make available, and preserve that corpus for future generations of students and scholars.
When I got the email just a few weeks ago saying this event was happening, I said, this is it. I have to come and thank Masha. She shaped my life in so many ways. Masha, thank you.
The Rudman Collection is located on the 21st floor of the library. It is a working collection and continues to grow, both in scope and in genres and themes covered. It is the largest public collection of its kind in the Pioneer Valley and one of the largest in all of New England, serving both the UMass Amherst community and the community at large. Using a community browser's card available at the Du Bois Library, anyone in the state of Massachusetts may borrow from the collection.
I think probably I got my start when I was teaching third grade in New York City in a very, very rough section of the Bronx. And I was permitted to teach these children to read using children's books. It was very lively. We had lots of arguments. I permitted my students to express their opinions. As a matter of fact, I required that they express their opinions. And I don't know if it was coincidental or it was because of this, they did beautifully on the standardized tests. And it was unusual for this group to do well on standardized tests.
Today, more and more books for children contain an expanding awareness of positive as well as negative treatments of society, as well as individual treatments of strengths, needs, and conditions of hitherto underserved populations. However, these books still constitute less than 10% of the 5,000 children's books published each year and make up only a fraction of public collections. Masha's collection is weighted heavily towards the inclusion of these rare books highlighting diverse populations.
I searched and searched for books that would have this invitation to the reader. And when I found them, I kept them on the shelf so that people could have access to them. I went to publishers' catalogs and went through all kinds of sources to select books that conveyed an issue. And the list of issues grew. And so the shelves of books grew and grew.
A lot of my work is researching the books, looking them up to see if they fit our criteria. If they do, I send for them. So what I do is I go onto our contact list and contact the different publishers, see if they want to make the donation. Once we get those books, I catalog them according to our criteria, and then I enter them into our online database. I see how relevant it really is, not to just children, but to adults really looking into the literature and reading books critically and seeing that there's so much more than just kid books there. I think it's so important to put out different themes and things like that for children because from what I know, I feel like when I was growing up, I didn't have a lot of diversity in my reading.
Masha published the first edition of Children's Literature, An Issues Approach, in 1976, 2 more editions in 1984 and 1995, and is currently finishing up work on the 4th edition. During the span of her career in education and writing, Masha collected an extensive amount of scholarly materials on the subject of children's literature, which are included in her collection under the code of PRO for professional books.
The Rudman Collection is unusual in many ways, both because of its richness in children's literature, but also because of the way in which it's organized.
It's organized in a different way from the conventional library cataloging because I wanted people to have access to the research that can be done on these books and the application to the classroom.
Masha developed her own scheme dependent upon her series of textbooks having to do with topics in children's literature. In order to help out with this, what I've done is to create a subject guide on the library's homepage under the topic of subject guides, and then the Rudman Collection. Once there, you will have a chance to look at a general explanation of the organization and also a very succinct way of approaching the collection. As an example, there are 2 tabs on the page which lead you to the terminology that Masha has chosen to use in describing the collection. The first one, the one labeled codes, will be the better approach. By clicking on that, you'll have access to a dual column listing of all of the codes that she is currently using and other ones as they evolve in the future. All you need to do at that point is to note down the word or words that are closest or similar to your own thinking. You're making the correlation between what you have in mind and how Masha has categorized it. And then go back to the library's homepage and go to the online catalog. Once there, select the tab at the top in the center that says 5 College Catalog, and just in the first box that appears, type Rudman, the word and, whatever topic you have, such as, say, bullying. You will then get a response showing only those books having to do with that subject in the Rudman Collection. It's effective, it's simple, and it will get you right to where you need to go.
Masha's codes of classification range from BU for bullying, to DEA for death, to ADO for adoption and foster care, to AB for abuse. Her extensive collection of different Cinderella stories fall into the chapter of myths, fantasy, and folklore, which uses the code MF, and also into the classification of Cinderella, using the code CIN. These Cinderella books can be easily found by searching the terms Rudman and Cinderella.
There are approximately 627 different Cinderellas in children's books. And there are many that have the Cinderella theme without actually being the fantasy. And that Cinderella is so different from one book to another. It's gratifying and exciting. And
according to Masha, her vast collection of different versions of the book Cinderella is the most often borrowed collection by teachers for use in the classroom.
And students very often do charts comparing who's the fairy godmother and what gets Cinderella to the ball, and most of the time it's magic, but sometimes it's her own gumption. And some of the Cinderellas are wimpy, and some of the Cinderellas are very outspoken and self-dependent. And it never ceases to entertain as well as provide food for thought. When you say, oh, a Cinderella, I wonder what kind of Cinderella she is. So that's the Cinderella, and that's been fun to collect.
The collection also contains books by 3 authors which can be used for author studies. These books do not follow the classification scheme of the rest of the collection, but can be easily identified by their purple tags and location by the windows at the end of the stacks.
We've selected 3 authors that you might want to look at for author studies. Joseph Bruchac writes mostly from a Native American and an indigenous person's point of view. Jacqueline Woodson writes from everybody's point of view. She has novels in verse, and she has gay characters, very sympathetically portrayed. All of her characters, or almost all of her characters, are African American. Jane Yolen has over 300 books published, and every genre, every issue, Jane has tackled it. I think modern authors are much more aware of the impact that children's books can have on the reader. And I think it's very important to support those authors who clearly think imaginatively, but also with social justice in mind. Because we critique the books not only for what they don't do, we critique them for what they do.
This collection really has taught me to think about the different readers and the different researchers and where they're coming from and their backgrounds.
My aim is to have people develop multiple perspectives so that they don't have tunnel reasoning. There's a lot to be discovered when you read about a counterculture or when a book raises an issue. Those kinds of discussions are the most interesting, and children benefit most from them as well.